Welcome to another episode of Exploring the Vintage NFT Space podcast with ZeroG. Today, I'm excited to have with me Shyam, who is one of the early AI artists that in the crypto scene, whose art has just been kind of rediscovered and entered trading for the first time in years and years. So I'm excited to talk to you today.
It's nice to be here. Yeah.
It's like this is really probably one of the best times to talk about AI art and AI and machine learning. It's like we've had, I mean, barn buster, like what, year and a half of like just J curve developments in the space. But before we jump into there, why don't you tell me the story about like how you learned about crypto, and then what was the thing that pushed you to make your first purchase?
Okay, so I think probably the first time I had a serious conversation about crypto was maybe a decade ago. So that would be 2013.
Yeah.
I had a friend from Canada who was really trying to get me sold on Bitcoin, and that got me interested, at least from a technical perspective. Unfortunately, I didn't have the foresight to kind of really go all in on Bitcoin in 2013, but I was fascinated, especially by the tech and the design and the architecture and the simplicity of it all. But for me to really get into it and start making purchases, I think that would be it would take another 4 or 5 years. So 2017 probably, or 2018 is when I would have made my first purchase. And the reason that I got into it more at that point in time was it's again a different tangent. So I don't know if you've heard, but there's a kind of a native crypto slash AI ML hedge fund called Numerai.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So they started, I think, in 2017, and around that time I was messing around with machine learning for my work. So I had got into the machine learning and AI field probably in late 2015, 2016. And so I was learning and kind of creating my own models and forecasting and predicting and stuff like that. And then when I saw Numerai, I got interested in it because, again, the concept was pretty unique. So I started creating some models for them, and that's kind of the first crypto token that I really interacted with, and that was the gateway drug for me, right? So once I started dealing with that, then I got into Ethereum and kind of branched out from there, right?
Oh, that's fascinating. I remember that token coming out, and because back then I was trying to keep up on most of the tech out there, and I remember that being really unique, and that was one of the first times actually, like, I guess one of the first use cases I actually saw for AI outside of purely theoretical that was actually being applied in the real world. Again, because I'm not someone who's studies in the field,
Yeah,
so I thought it was
it was
interesting.
pretty neat because they would give you all the data, but then it was all anonymized. So you would be creating models uh, partially blind,
Uh-huh.
but then they would aggregate all of the models and create a meta model, which would actually then be used in their real hedge fund in making investments. And based on how each of the individual models performed, you would get a fraction of the payout. So that's how it worked, right?
Oh, cool. Whatever, like I didn't keep up with them. Whatever happened to them? Did they nuke like most of the other 2017 altcoins?
No, they're still there. They're still
Okay.
active. Yeah,
Mhm.
I haven't been too active on the platform, but they're still there. I think I still
Okay.
probably have like some old models still still sitting there and making predictions on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely interesting. Um, yeah.
Yeah, but then
It's
yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
interesting too, in the sense that, like now the flavor of the day is kind of like ML ops, where you basically have a pipeline for like analyzing and retraining stuff. So this is basically before that trend where it was like manually creating
yeah,
and analyzing and
yeah. I
doing
think
that
in those
instead.
days it was just like you would people were just creating their own models and setting up their own stack. It was all manual, and from my experience, the biggest pain point, or the thing that took the most time was just wrangling with your with your Python environment and NVIDIA drivers and everything, getting everything set up manually, because you didn't have these one-click cloud installations and stuff at that point. Now you can just click a button, like pay a few dollars, and there's cloud stack running with all the libraries pre-installed and everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, having like across all these different development environments, I haven't done the AI stuff, but it's similar in some of the other stuff as a, you know, having stuff Dockerized and having all of these different environments that you can just get out of a box instead of having to. I feel the same way when I'm trying to set up a new workstation or something for, I don't know, it takes, feel like you waste a lot of time, that you could be focusing on, actually doing what you're after. So
yeah, for sure. And I think the good thing though is that once you get everything set up and you have a local a GPU and a rig that you have full control over, then it gives you so much more freedom. Even today, I feel that if you have your own 4090, or if you're lucky, like an A100 or something, and you set it up and then you're happy with it, you can do so much more than on a cloud rig.
yeah, for sure. I mean, because it doesn't take long for your workstation to pay itself back by how much you'd be spending in cloud costs, if you have a beefy GPU.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, before we go forward, let's also touch base on. Normally, I don't touch on education, but since this is kind of like a blend of art and tech. So what was your education like leading up to your interest in AI, and what's your background in kind of art?
Yeah, so I did my graduate studies in computer engineering and my postgraduate in software systems, distributed systems
Oh,
specifically.
okay, cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of my educational background, and I've been working in. So I started off my career working with in the networking domain. So this was for kind of telecommunication networks, things like at that time it was just 3G transitioning into 4G. So we'll be working on the software that would actually make the mobile towers do what they're supposed to, kind of allocating radio resource channels and stuff like that. So that's where I started off with, and then for a long time I was working in the kind of internet technology fields. So making the internet easier, better, faster, safer. So the company that I work for would sell software that was bought by internet service providers, so that
Okay.
their internet would work better, right?
Yeah, kind of like commercial level software instead of, yeah, got it.
Yeah, and that's kind of a part of the reason also why I got into machine learning. Of course, and once I heard about machine learning and the field of machine learning and AI, as you probably know, it's existed for like decades, right? Maybe like since the 1950s or so. And up until now, the way that it worked was every few decades, there would be a breakthrough. Somebody would create a new kind of thing. And then there would be like a small burst of activity around it.
Yeah.
But then there would be an AI winter. And then for like the next couple of decades, there wouldn't be any new breakthrough. And this pattern kind of repeated, I think, 1950s, 1970s, 1990s. And some of these things that got discovered during this time really did make a big impact. It's just that they didn't get the press of the new models that are happening today, right? For example, something like a random forest model, which is used for a lot of classification tasks. It is a form of machine learning. You can call it AI if you want to, and it's used almost globally by all sorts of companies and governments and people like that to to classify records into one form or the other, or to classify if somebody's trying to do like, insurance fraud and things like that, right? It's just that, this stuff was happening in the background with data analysts were using it, hedge fund people were using it for sure, so that it wasn't really breaking out into common parlance. What happened around post 2010 or so was the breakthroughs started coming thick and fast. So we had a lot of these, we had breakthroughs in neural nets itself, when people figured out how to actually run neural nets in GPU, and you could actually scale them much more than what was happening up until then when you were trying to run them on CPUs. This kind of became the spark. And once I think this was mainly from the work of Geoffrey Hinton and his team. And once that happened, then it's kind of like the exponential curve started at that point. So in every exponential curve, you don't really realize that you're on an exponential for the first bit. It feels like it's on a very steady curve, but then all of a sudden you have this inflection point, and then you're going vertical, right? So I think the like from 2010 to like 2018 or so, we were on the exponential curve. It's just that most people didn't know.
Yeah.
So and like once the breakthroughs like GANs, generative adversarial networks, and transformers, and all of these things started happening one after the other, then things really changed, right? Because it wasn't like those previous AI bull runs anymore. And now, considering where we are with OpenAI and GPT and everything else, it's hard to imagine that we would be having another AI winter anytime soon.
I think it's hard to. I do think we might see. I mean, there's been a lot of hype, and a lot of people, like a lot of companies and whatnot, have been buying GPUs and everything for machine learning. I mean, I could definitely see some of the hype cool off, but I don't think we're ever going back, like in the same sense, like you were saying, of a really like a winter, in the sense like already, you can already see some of the effects of this, like you were saying, this like it matches kind of what my experience too, is that some of the, like I've heard, and I'd see some stuff every now and here and there on news sites or whatever until 2018, and I'd keep up with some of the computer technology. But after that, we've witnessed, from 2018 to now, like you said, it's been a J curve where things have just exploded, and we've seen real world where, even though like all this technology is just kind of like burst through, we're just now starting to see some of the impacts in society too. Like, as an example, um, so one of the news sites I would go to, um, you know, uh, you can clearly see that they're using AI generated thumbnails for their articles now. Whereas before they would have to either use a paid uh, image gallery site like Shutterstock or something, pay for stock art. But now we have, AI is so fast. And hardware now is so fast that it's cost effective to just generate something on the fly, and it's good enough, and in many cases more appropriate than a real Shutterstock image or whatnot.
Yeah. And I think there is, especially, and I'll probably touch on this later in our discussion about the pushback that's coming from the traditional artist community when it comes to AI entering art creation. But I think it's something that you will see a lot of in a lot of different spheres. Anytime AI becomes good enough to do something better than the humans who were doing it previously, there will be a lot of pushback. And some of it might be valid. I feel a lot of it is also misguided in some cases, because it's just people would tend to get defensive when the thing that they have been doing for a long time can now be done by a machine. It's only human for that to happen. And I've actually seen this happen even before like this big AI boom kickoff for my work. So when the reason why our the company that I was working in at that point got into AI and machine learning was because the internet was changing all the time, and just because of different protocols being used and stuff like that, the old model, which was very manual, there was a large number of people sitting there and creating like very custom code for each kind of internet application. That model just went out the window, right? It wouldn't work anymore. So we had to come up with something new, and I was leading the team that was trying to solve this problem using machine learning and AI. And there was a lot of like we started off with some early kind of researchy models, and we saw that there was promise, so we kind of spent a lot more time and got a lot more data. And then we saw this the fact that with more data, the models get exponentially better, right? Which is kind of what underpins all of these LLM situations that we see now. But once we started seeing results that were on par with what the humans previously were able to do, this was hard for me to kind of understand, because my expectation as an engineer or like a computer programmer at that point was, this thing can now do what the humans were able to do. So it's obviously, it has reached the level, it should immediately be kind of productized and shipped. But what actually happened was that the people, the people who were manually doing it before, the leadership in the company, the engineering leadership, the business leadership, it took more time for us than it took to actually train those models and create those models, to convince all these people that we should do it using these models, right? It was so painful, but it took like a year basically to convince people, right? But part of it was because many of those people were coming at it from the fact that this thing used to take like 20 people 6 months to do. Now you're telling me that this piece of this algorithm or this model can do it almost instantly, right? So it was hard to kind of grok that, right? Like, people are saying that there's got to be a catch somewhere, like this thing can't work, or this thing gonna, it's only working in laboratory conditions, it's going to fail in the real world. All these kinds of things were kind of baked into it. And you also had the case of, what if it doesn't work, or what if it makes a mistake, what's going to happen then? But the reality of it was that the humans were also making mistakes. We would just learn from those mistakes and we would fix them. And that's the same thing that happened with the machine learning models once we actually deployed them, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing with tech too. Well, especially like defined as code tech, where iterations are so much faster than other forms um of adapting, where you can, you make a tweak, you test it, you make a new version, it's the rate of change is so much faster with this stuff. It's interesting, your analogy. I don't I haven't worked professionally with very much with the AI or machine learning stuff, but I have like a similar thing I've seen myself is another technology breakthroughs. Like, I remember when virtualization became a thing with VMware, when they released GSX and later ESX. You had some holdouts that were some people that were like all like pros staying with physical boxes, and I mean, look where that got you, like trying to fight progress there. And a similar thing with your story about about the adoption being harder than the actual tech is what I've seen with some of the newer technology, like with network virtualization, is that I've seen companies where they'll even pay for these solutions. Like with VMware, they bought Nicira, and that had so they released NSX, and I've seen these companies where they'll pay for NSX licenses, which are not cheap, but it ends up becoming a political turf war, because the network part of a company doesn't want to actually adapt and use this new technology because they view it as a threat, and they just want to stay all with the Cisco stuff. And I don't know. It's interesting how how the human equation comes into all this tech, right?
Yeah, you mean you can see it all the time. And like you said, it's even more slower and more drastic when it happens outside of the tech world. But even inside the tech industry, you see it all the time. For example, with Nokia, like they were leading the game when it comes to mobile phones and even smartphones, right? Those
Yeah.
phones could run apps. They had an app store. They had all of it, but they got completely kind of blown out of the water when Apple came up with
Yeah,
App Store.
the first real smartphone I wanted was I think it was that Nokia. It had like a little Windows CE thing. I mean,
Yeah,
that was way
yeah,
ahead of its time back then.
yeah, yeah. And I actually did some work for Nokia in the past, and I know a lot of people who work there. And part of the problem was that they had like hundreds, thousands of people who were very experienced in a particular platform. Like Symbian was the the operating system that ran on Nokia smartphones, and for them to kind of scale up or to change to using Android or something else in a quick period of time was almost impossible, right? They were too big. There are too many people who had invested too much into a particular thing, and they couldn't change fast enough.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so there's like an inertia there that fought them from actually adopting to what, because it became pretty clear after a while that either you're going to have especially after, well, I mean, speaking of, Nokia was bought by Microsoft,
Yeah, yeah,
and they were forced them to use that Microsoft mobile operating system that they like Microsoft then later abandoned. So
yeah. I mean,
uh,
it is a very even from the outside, sometimes it feels like it's a pretty straightforward or an easy transition or a thing that it's obvious. But in reality, what often happens is you have hundreds of people there who've been working for decades and who are experts in a particular kind of thing. So what do you do with all those people, right?
yeah,
One option is to kind of let them go, which is hard. The other option is to keep them and try to change them to kind of now do this new thing. But the problem is that these people have spent 20 years of their life doing the other thing. So the way that they think about the new thing will always be to kind of try to fit it into the into the mold, into the mental models that they have of the old thing. That was what I think what happened even with the whole Nokia Windows thing, right? Like they were still trying to fit it into their old model of trying to do things because they thought that that was the right way.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I mean, and I don't think is Nokia even around anymore.
So they're still around as
Okay,
a network equipment vendor, not
okay,
consumer. Yeah, not a consumer device. I think they sold the consumer brand to like a Chinese company or something.
okay. Oh, interesting. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely interesting how all this tech plays out. So you got involved with the Numerai, that AI hedge fund fund product, which I thought was really again a really interesting concept. And you've been doing AI for work for a while, it sounds like. What
Yeah,
piqued your interest like at the time, like or what interested you about the NFT scene and what gave you the idea to kind of maybe make that leap into creating some art yourself?
yeah. So this is this story is kind of serendipitous. So I was working in Bangalore in India at the time, and uh, I don't know if you've ever seen or been to Bangalore, but the traffic there is just terrible, right? It's like the worst in the world that I've seen. So I used to spend like hours on traffic trying to drive home. So at that time, I kind of discovered podcasts, and one of the podcasts that I listened to once while stuck in traffic was one which talked about I mean, it was not called NFTs at the time; it was called crypto art, right? So I think this was the one by Jason Bailey. It was called Dank Memes or something like that,
Yeah.
and they featured the founders of SuperRare on it on that podcast that I just happened to listen to,
Oh,
right?
okay. Yeah.
So that's when I heard for the first time about this whole concept, like that there exists something like this, like a digital art platform where art gets tokenized and collected. Uh, and this was really new. I think SuperRare was just launching, so they were kind of uh, telling about it on the podcast and stuff like that. And then once I got home, I kind of checked this out, and it was really interesting to me, mainly because I've always been into art, even though I'm not, professionally taught in terms of art. I'm completely self-taught, but I've always created art in whatever form. And most of the time what happened was nobody would actually see this see the stuff that
Yeah.
I created. I would just create it. I would just like paint stuff or draw stuff and then roll it up. I have like so many these rolled up cylinders back in my home which nobody's ever seen, right? And
A
there's a
bunker
lot
of
of there's a lot of
art. Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of reasons for it, because I was very much kind of in this engineering / tech world, which is very far from the art world. So I wouldn't really fit into traditional art circles, and I wouldn't even know, I wouldn't even know anybody there, right? So even if I did create art, I wouldn't know what to do with it if I wanted other people to see it. So it was a very kind of different world for me. So that's part of the reason why when I heard about kind of a platform where I could share my art, and people from all around the world who I have never met would be able to kind of look at it, right? And if they like it, collect it, share it, all of those things, that's what appealed to me. And it's actually interesting in a way, because my dad, he has a similar background to mine. So he was also a computer programmer. He was one of the early ones, and
Oh
early
wow. Yeah.
COBOL,
Oh
core
yeah,
and
yeah.
Numerai. Like when he was working, they had those computers that was just, the entire room was the computer, right?
It's kind of funny that if he wanted a side hustle, I'm sure he could still make a fortune because there's so many companies that still have
Yeah,
mainframes and
yeah.
whatnot that are using COBOL that are just desperate for.
Yeah, I read that somewhere. I told him the last time I saw him that, the like old COBOL programmers are charging like crazy hourly rates.
Yeah, yeah, he could have a pretty crazy side hustle in his retirement, man.
Yeah, it's like COBOL's never going away, right? There's just so much stuff that's running on it, and the stuff works, so people don't want to change it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've come across a lot of organizations where they have COBOL code and mainframes, and it's a tremendous ask for them to move off of that. I mean, for someone outside of IT, it sounds simple to just replace mainframe with X, but like these companies are in this weird. Part of it is like a it's like a knowledge or a data problem where um
Yeah,
like no one, like they don't even have full knowledge of what their mainframe does, and like what how this like all this code is essentially like a lot of it is largely abandoned, and no one knows how to. So it's just so fragile that it takes a
yeah,
lot of effort and care to even understand what you're trying to replace, let alone like do the replacement in a manner without breaking things.
yeah. And most of it is so obscure that you're not gonna find the support on Stack Overflow or even on ChatGPT, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to get a lot of answers about DB2 stuff, and
Yeah.
you know, yeah, it's definitely yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. So he was a one of the like you were saying, really early
Yeah,
programmers.
so he was really early on the stuff. So I kind of grew up around this. Like when I was in kindergarten, there were like, those giant hard drives
Yeah. Mhm.
that I used to play with at home, which he brought back from his office. Like I think they were like 100 MB was
Yeah.
kind of, you know, weighed like a few kilograms. It was really huge. Like this giant disc. So my dad was also I'd say that he's a much better artist than me, and he was more serious during his university days with art. He did all kinds of art, right? He did oil paintings, and also like he continued, like even though he stopped art after university and then got into work, and then he kind of he was always kind of doing, there are like books and books of comic strips that he actually drew and wrote, which have not been seen by anybody other than my mom and me. And they're all just sitting there. And he actually was really early with digital art as well. So we had this. I think we got our first personal computer at home. I think maybe like 89, 1990 or something like that. And I was
Yeah.
just in kindergarten at that time, and there was. I think we got the first mouse in our house maybe 1992 or something like that.
Yeah.
And there was I don't even know what the software is called. It was a precursor to something like an MS Paint, right, where you can move it around and you can paint stuff with it. So that's the first time that I'm seeing digital art, right? Like somebody create digital art, and it used to take like ages, but my dad really liked to do it. So he even created like a painting of the Taj Mahal or something in it, which must have taken him days. But I really remember
That's
vividly,
that's
right?
awesome.
So I kind of probably get my artistic side from there, and I've always, like I said, I've always created art, and just used to keep it hidden away somewhere. And then there's this new world kind of opens up where I can actually show it to people, right? And sometimes people find it cool, and that makes my day, right? Even if it's not really about I know it's a cliche, but it's not really about the money that people are willing to spend on it. It's just the fact that people are valuing the art that you created, right?
Yeah, that's one thing I think is truly extraordinary about the internet is it allows, people with, allows a couple nerds like ourselves to get together and talk about a shared interest in like crypto art and IT stuff and whatnot. Whereas, before the internet, like I don't know, this just wouldn't have happened. You know, like you'd have to go through like what meetups or something. I don't know. It's amazing that like you
The,
said, also like the ability to like publish digitally, like that is secure, that is limited, does have enforced scarcity is
yeah, I
it's
mean
really kind of mind blowing.
that was the other thing that kind of interested me about NFTs, or
Hmm.
crypto art, is the fact that there were these other digital art platforms out there like DeviantArt and stuff like that, but you would hear all the time that somebody would post something and somebody else would just take it and reuse it somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
So there was no concept of provenance. There was no, people could just steal your work, and there was no way that you would be able to prove that this thing is something that you are the original creator of, unless you already have like a large distribution or a large social presence or something, right?
Yeah, that's cool. So you just kind of so you've been, doing like quote unquote normal like art and digital art prior to that, and then you just had the inspiration to like how did so you heard that podcast about with the SuperRare guys, so and you
Yes.
started digging into it, so um
Yeah, so I
what
think
was your what was your first art that you tokenized too,
yeah,
as you're telling the story?
I think it was so. I dabble in kind of mixed media art. So some of the art that I do, I create by hand. There's also like photography I do, and then digital post processing. And this was even before getting into AI and stuff. Like, and even with AI, I usually do like a few different layers. So it's not just like a straight, give something to AI and take it usually, but it's kind of mixing different uh, uh, kind of concepts from different places and then trying to see what comes out of it. So I think the first piece of art that I tokenized was probably on SuperRare. When I heard about this, I just wanted to try it out and see what happens. So there was this photograph that I had taken and then done some post processing on. It was called Graffiti on the Temple Walls. And it was taken, the original photo was taken by me, I think in probably like 2012 or 2013 or something like that. And it was from this like 1,000-year-old abandoned temple in South India that I was kind of roaming around in at that time.
Yeah.
And what had happened was, over the centuries, so many people had gone there, and everybody had kind of scribbled their name or their address or whatever on the wall, on this kind of ancient historical monument. So it was, um, it was surreal in a way that this is a historical monument. So what these people are doing is clearly kind of defacing it by scribbling meaningless things on it. But for me, like, the reason why I took the photo and decided to spend time on the photo was that it kind of was art in a way, that like all these centuries of people had come there and tried to do stuff to that wall. And at the end of the thing, like, even though all of them had done this without any artistic intent in mind, the end result of it still looked like art to me, right? So this was the piece. I'll see if I can find it. It's probably listed on SuperRare, and I can share my screen. But that was the first piece. I already had this ready, so I thought, when I heard about SuperRare, I thought I can just upload this and see what happens, right? That's kind of the story of the first mint.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, we've also been witness to like like just talking about digital photography too, like both with editing and on our PCs, but also just with the technology on capture too. It's been, in our lifetime, it's been crazy to see the emergence of like those first digital cameras, and now we've got, everyone has some pretty crazy horsepower on their smartphones now.
Yeah, if you can enable screen sharing for me, I can maybe quickly show it, if that's okay.
I can't do it like right now. It, like, for whatever reason, that crashes our session with Zoom. So I'll have to get it from you after the fact. So sorry about that.
I can send the link to you, but that's fine.
Okay.
But
Yeah. If you can send me the link, I can pull it up that way.
Yeah. Now, because I was just looking at it, and it was on June 26th, 2018 that
Okay.
I minted it. And on June 27th, somebody actually bought it. Right?
Oh, cool.
So that kind of got my interest, right? I'm like, so there's really a market out there for this, right? Like the kind of art that I like, there are actual people out there who value it, right?
Yeah, that's got to be really gratifying as kind of as an experiment to see it sell, I mean, regardless of what the price was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So what did you like? What did you decide to explore next after you minted that your photograph?
Yeah, so I think after that, I started. That was around the time since, like I already mentioned, that I was already working with machine learning and AI.
Yeah.
And this is when some of the early neural net based model, the different artistic models, those research papers were just getting published. So maybe I can give a little bit of a brief here.
Yeah, sure.
For listeners, just so that there's some context. So
yeah, it'd be educational for me too, because I only know like super high level stuff.
Yeah, so AI is this big umbrella term that covers a lot of different things. Machine learning models are one subset of it. Machine learning models could be something really simple, even something like a linear regression model, just trying to plot points on a curve to predict something, to say something is yes or no, for example, right? Is this fraud or is this not fraud, right? That's machine learning model. But then what kind of revolutionized all of the quote unquote AI that we see today is this concept of neural networks. And the concept itself had existed for decades, but the ability to run neural networks and create large neural networks on and train them on GPU enabled hardware is what really changed things. So everything is basically a neural network, and there are different flavors of these, right? So, and then at this time, there was kind of an explosion in terms of the new research that was coming out. So one of the earliest research papers at that time, which came out, was called Neural Style Transfer. So this was about how you can take the style of a particular image and then transfer it to another image. And this is where you would have seen images of, like this cat drawn in the style of Van Gogh or Picasso and stuff like that, right? So that's when that became popular.
Oh yeah.
So And there were lots of different variations of neural style transfer. You could do neural style transfer using GANs. You can even do it using transformers, which are used for LLMs. You can use it. There are all variations of neural networks that you could use to achieve this. And each researcher was trying to say that, I can do this with lower resources or faster or better. And there was a big diversity of these models. So that was one of the first models that I used to create art. And what I was trying to do was, again, have kind of mixed media. So I had art which I had hand created, some of them a long time ago, like a decade ago in some cases, and then there were photographs that I'd taken. So I would kind of use neural style transfer to kind of mix these things together. So I think that was one of the first things that I started doing. And I had access to like my own dedicated hardware with NVIDIA GPUs at that point, which is one reason why I was able to do some of these things.
Were you using a single GPU, or were you using multiple GPUs back then in your rig?
I think it started off with a single GPU. I think it was probably at the very beginning, it was just like, it was a 1080 Ti or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Later I had like a cluster of them, so I could do more. But to start with, these things would take hours and hours to run, right? So I would run them overnight in some cases, and then go back the next day and look at it. In some cases, it would come out right. In some cases, it would be total garbage, throw away, and then do it again. But one of the problems that, and this is, I think, if you look at SuperRare and some of my early art, you can see that this is where it's coming from. So I played around with this concept, created art using this neural mixing, and some of it is even animated because you can actually show the process during the training of the model, where it's different kind of flavors of the image, and then you put them together into an animated image. One of the problems that we faced during that time was the fact that because of the limitations of the models themselves and the hardware that we had access to, the images were all very low res, right? They were like 256 by 256 or 512 at max, right? So they looked kind of blurry and not really good. So one of the things that I tried to do to kind of work around this was I created a custom algorithm, which I call neural murals. Is what it does is it basically takes the images that I want to do neural mixing with, and then it kind of cuts them up into smaller pieces in different styles, which I can specify in the algorithm, like how to do this, into how many pieces, in what form. And then it takes each of these things and then mixes them and kind of puts them together at the end. So
yeah, kind of like a batch processing model for it. Like, like you were talking about your background. Yeah, cut it up into smaller chunks that can be, and then bring it together. Yeah.
And at that time, some of these early super resolution models had started coming through as well, which are way rudimentary compared to the kind of super resolution that we have today. But the good thing was that if you were feeding it a small enough piece, like if you fed it like a 128 by 128 image, it could pretty reasonably upscale it to 256 by 256, right? So I kind of used this algorithm to create art that was large in scope, right? So I think some of the early art from 2018, some of those lost pieces were created using this technique, and they are like 3,300 by 3,300 in some cases. Like, it's huge, right? Like 17 MB, 13 MB in size. But the cool thing was that it looked good, at least to my eyes. And if you wanted to print it out onto canvas and stuff like that, it would still look good, right?
Which is like, AI aside, back then that was still huge file sizes for most of the crypto art that was being sold and whatnot.
Yeah, I actually couldn't upload it in some cases because people had file size limits of 5 MB and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so when you were creating those using that technique for the how long did it take to process? Like you're saying you had that kind of your custom model that was kind of cutting that up and processing them. How long did it take to create one of your pieces like that?
Yeah, I think it used to take upwards of 12 hours,
Okay.
just to kind of get the final image.
Hmm.
And if I didn't kind of line up all my configuration options in the right way, it again would not work, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it took days to kind of get the thing just the right fit.
And I was curious, so you know, you're again like it's very apparent, like you were saying, the quality of the work is also like or the file size and the quality of the work really sets it apart from a lot of the other early AI artwork that I've seen. A lot of it is, like you said, either low res or looks, um, there's, I don't know the right term I would use, but maybe other than creepy, right? Some of the processes that like you can end up um, with output that is unnatural in a way that I think just because it's so foreign to our visual system, it causes kind of a visceral reaction. But
Yeah, I think I think especially with the early GAN work, it was, it was right in the middle of uncanny valley, right?
yeah, exactly.
Super uncanny. It would kind of, creep you out in some cases.
It's funny. That's why I had people telling me about Deep Black and some of those other AI crypto art pieces a couple of years ago, and I didn't really jump into them because I took a look at them and I appreciated the technology, but it was just like so creepy. I was like, I'm not really sure I like looking at this, you know?
Yeah,
Oh,
that you
that's
know
cool.
the GAN stuff was
Mhm.
probably what came after this phase for me.
Yeah.
So I think Ian Goodfellow was the guy who invented the GAN, and he
Mm.
published this research paper, and then people started using it for all kinds of things, including
Okay.
including creating images.
Mhm.
So the way the GAN models work, at a really kind of basic level, is you have what you can think of as two models. One plays the role of uh, a detective, and the other plays the role of an impersonator. And the impersonator tries to be better than the detective, so the detective doesn't know if it's an impersonator or a real person,
Okay.
and the detective tries to be, better so that it can actually catch the impersonator every time, right? So this is the underlying mechanism that it uses to create art. So that it's trying to create art that's good enough, so that the model itself cannot realize how this is different from an actual image, right?
Oh, that's really clever. Okay.
So that's the underlying concept of how GANs work. And people started creating like different flavors of GANs. So I think the one that really got my interest was called ATTN GAN, or attention GAN. And this is the first, as far as I can tell, the first text to image model. So you could put in a bunch of words and it would create something, right? Whatever it created did not look at anything like what you had typed in. but but it's still, created. Like maybe if you wrote something like round ball or like a square or something, it would give you something that looked similar. But any sort of prompt that you would type, like today you would type into Midjourney, for example, it would it would create just like some random noise. But for me, that, there was a certain beauty in it as well, because it was working in the same concept that, today's diffusion models like Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, and models like DALL-E work on. It's the fact that there are all these neurons in the neural network, and these neurons have associated certain colors, certain textures, certain shapes to certain words, to certain tokens. So when it sees those tokens, it tries to kind of apply those, whatever it has learned. It's the same concept that the early GAN models used as well. It's just that,
Okay.
they didn't have the scale, or the
Uh-huh.
memory or any of those, resources to actually do that, uh, uh, line by line, or, pixel
Yes.
by pixel, right?
Yeah, and that's
But you
something
could
I
still
wanted
do it.
to
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to touch on just briefly is, since you obviously are very intimate with the progression of the technology, how big of obviously we've seen a huge advancement in the models that have been developed in the different variations of that. How big of how big has it, or what would you say the interplay is between again, since 2018, we had like 1080s or 1080 Ti's available for normies like us, or, you had access, I'm sure, to professional gear. But now we have like 4090s, which are, have like more than double the VRAM. Like the VRAM's probably three times, four times as fast. We have like the number of CUDA cores is, I don't know, probably 4x with, I'm just a guesstimate with, the CUDA version is like back then was like 5 or 6, and now it's, what, I think probably 12 or something. I don't know, like how important do you think the hardware has been, the increased hardware resources, and also we have more system memory and whatnot available too for the progression of some of this technology? Or do you think it like it still would have progressed as quickly without this kind of really increase in compute power?
No, I think the improvements in the hardware were definitely needed for it to go this fast.
Uh-huh.
It was probably a mix of both, right? For me,
Yeah.
you had the hardware which was improving like every 8 to 10 months. You had like a newer card coming out which is like basically twice as good. And then on the other side, you had models that were being trained with an exponential number of data points, right?
Yeah.
So if in 2017 they were using uh, you know a million images, by 2018 they were using a billion images, right? so
Yeah.
so and the more the positive results were happening, the more budget that was being allocated for this kind
Okay.
of research, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. So kind of like a feedback loop, essentially.
yeah, yeah. I mean, companies like Google and Facebook get a lot of flack, but then a lot of the work that's happening today, which is benefiting companies like OpenAI and Midjourney, were benefited by a lot of the research that happened in companies like Google and Facebook and Microsoft, where they were just allocating huge amounts of budgetary resources for just research, and then people would publish this research, right? And people would get access to these models. They were open source. In some cases the data itself was open source, and then it kind of grew exponentially from there, which meant that the models themselves became more and more optimal. They could do the same thing that they were doing in 2017 for half or 1/10 of the resources by 2018. But by
Okay.
then the hardware was 10 times as better, right? So then it became exponential, right? Because now
I
then,
see.
instead of doing the same thing that they did in 2017, they could do it for 100 times the amount of data in 2018.
I see. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so like radically more efficient. Plus, we have like more horsepower to throw at it too. So like kind of like exponential from that function. So that makes sense.
Yeah. And just going back to the attention GAN
Yeah.
phase. So I think early days, probably Runway was one of the platforms at that time who offered attention GAN as a service. Like if you had a Runway account and bought some credits, you could play with it. You could give it text and it would generate images for you. And these images, like I said, they were, the best word to describe them would probably be weird, right? So you would
Yeah.
type in text and they would give you like these weird outputs. But for me, it was almost like a game, right? Like you could put in phrases that would get you to a certain kind of look that then you could play around with. So an example of this would be, so I have the series of art called Memories of Metropolis. There's a lot of pieces on SuperRare. I think it was quite popular when it came out at that time. A lot of people liked it. It's like this weird dystopian city, just like AI generated. And I was creating like different scenes of the city, right? So an airport terminal or a bus station, a train station or a school, stuff like this. So for me, the key to creating this was there was this, string of words, a phrase, which is like a passkey to get to Metropolis, right? When I type in these 3 or 4 words, it would kind of get me to like a base image of a certain kind, and then I would just need to add a few extra words, and it would give me different views of this world, right? So I think it is weird in a way, but this was the first time that kind of the concept of these large AI models as a world model kind of started to appeal to me. So people refer to large language models as world models because they have a concept of the world in whatever way, right? Not like the concept of the world that we have, right? I'm not trying to say that these models are conscious or anything, but just that they have
self-referential in the sense that, got it.
They have an embedding, which is that this is the world, right?
Yeah.
So which means that you could, by prompting them in the right way, create an infinite multiverse of whatever kinds of worlds that you would want to see, right? So in this case, it's like I input these 3 or 4 magic words, and then it immediately takes me to this very specific look, right? And I'll send you the link so you can see how the different images, they're different in color tone and everything, but it looks like these are different scenes from this creepy dystopian world, right? And to get that exact look, you need to enter in these 3 or 4 very specific words. So it's almost like this magic key that takes you into this world, right?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean that, like, the text base, the text prompt, technology, like you said, but now we've got newer models, but like that's proved to be, like it's already, it's basically democratized access for a lot of these tools for people that don't have any computer science education or whatnot. I mean, it's I don't know, it's being embedded, like as we're recording this at the end of 2023, we're already seeing companies embedding this in all sorts of platforms, and they're planning on doing it in almost everything, from supports like help desk systems to chatbots to all sorts of things, because it's so flexible, and it makes sense to, it's a logical interface for users, right? To just be able to prompt with words, right?
Yeah. And I think the interesting bit of it, or one of the interesting bits of it to me, is still the fact that this technology is still it's still arcane in a way, if you know what I mean. That like even the people who create it don't completely understand it, right? Like we don't know exactly how it does what it does. We have a pretty good idea in most cases, but we don't have the exact data. Like why does it answer exactly this when I ask it this, right? Or why did it draw specifically this when I ask it this? So that means that it's a bit different from your standard computing paradigm, right? Where it's mostly rule based. You say that when this happens, then this has to happen. If it doesn't happen, then it's a bug, right? But with this new kind of paradigm, it's you're asking it for something and then it does something, right? It may not do the same thing when you ask it again, right? And if you ask it slightly different way, sometimes when you ask it nicely, it does things in a different way.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's really fascinating too. The range of possibilities, like you said. I don't know. I think I'm just really excited to see how this stuff develops. I mean, I'm trying to remain optimistic too, and not fall into the, AI is gonna take all of our jobs and we're all gonna be on the streets. I think it'll be like akin to all these other things we've seen in our life so far, where just because like virtualization, like it rendered like vanilla sysadmins like wiped out a ton of those. But we've seen the what's taken up even more jobs is the advent of like DevOps and
Yeah.
those types of engineers that weren't a thing back then, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, there's always gonna like there's an
Yeah, I think,
infinite yeah,
yeah.
there's an infinite demand for productivity. So how humans will adapt to, I don't know,
Yeah,
that'll be interesting.
I think in general, humans have a tough time of uh, predicting or what the future is going to look like. So they tend to, or we, sorry, I'm not non-human. We tend to kind of uh, over emphasize the future. I mean, the present, right? We expect that things will still be similar to what we are experiencing right now. So we always tend to think of anything that would be drastically different from what we are experiencing now as catastrophic, right? We think that, oh, our current way of existence is going to change, which means that, it's probably a bad thing, right? Even though, we can theorize that it might be good, we still have this existential dread that comes of it. And we've seen this happen many, many, many times before, with the industrial revolution, with the coming of machines, with coming of computers, with coming of all kinds of new, software. Every time something old gets obsoleted, it doesn't mean that, humanity shrinks, right? Instead, we grow.
Yeah, exactly. I think it'll be good. Well, one thing I was meaning to ask you too. So you started out minting your work on SuperRare, and you were playing with these different machine learning models, like you were saying, neural nets and GANs and whatnot for the actual processing with your custom model. Like some of your work, I just picked up one of them recently. You released on a now defunct platform. Why did you choose to mint? I forget the name of it off the top of my head. Why did you
Yeah.
choose to mint there, and what was the appeal of that particular platform at the time?
So I think this was
Yeah,
Portion.io
that's it. Hmm.
was the portion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I was just kind of branching out from SuperRare and seeing what else was out there. And it was not
Uh-huh.
just Portion. I think I minted on a lot of platforms, most of which
Okay.
went down in the crypto bust. Uh, so Portion was kind of interesting to me because they SuperRare was kind of one-on-one, right? Like you had like
Yeah.
everything was a single piece and was unique. Portion was the one where I personally first experimented with kind of editions, where you could have multiple editions of the same art.
Okay.
And I forget where I first heard about them, but then I had a chat with the founder, and he was pretty cool. He liked some of my pieces, so I thought, it's kind of a good place to experiment with trying like multi-edition pieces. So that's why I kind of minted some in Portion, but unfortunately the platform didn't really take off. I think they tried like a rebrand, and then kind of did some stuff, but it never really got going. There was also a bunch of other websites
Mhm.
which I used, which have gone down. Sometimes when I trawl through my old emails, that's when I remember, oh, there was this thing.
Yeah, I guess the other thing that like for listeners to realize is, when you were doing this in 2018, when you started minting, like this was in the dead of crypto winter. Like
Yeah.
everyone who everyone who wasn't a diehard was like left the scene. So like it was super dead.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, from my experience of the last 5 years or so, making art, minting stuff has been more pleasurable during the winters, right? During the crypto winters, just because the only people who are still there are people who actually care about the stuff, right?
Yeah.
Both from an artist perspective and from a collector perspective, these are the people who care about the art, who are collecting it because they value it, and who believe in the project, right? What happened was that once the last big crypto bull run started kicking off, then you had all these, of course, like all the scamsters and all the people trying to make a quick buck, and everybody just kind of completely flooded the market. They flooded everything, right? So you couldn't talk about this stuff anymore with any sort of perspective, right? On social media or anywhere, right?
Yeah, it's funny. It just got like you said, like it's funny that the scamsters basically like sucked all the oxygen out of the environment. They like not only did they run away with a ton of money, but they like using all of their scammy marketing and all that, they basically like took the attention away too with their, they like I don't know, it's they would do these fake fake attention marketing. Like I know one of the famous ones was like Mechaverse when they were doing
Yeah.
their token. They had millions of botted accounts in their Discord to get FOMO, and then they reveal their their terrible art. It's just oh, that was a classic one. But yeah, I mean, just scammers just really running amok and kind of
Yeah, the biggest problem was that a lot of people who weren't tech savvy or didn't really
yeah,
understand the tech of it would get scammed, right? Because for
yeah.
them, for maybe for you and I, it would be obvious when you see something that you shouldn't click on it, or this is not Elon Musk giving you a coin drop. But for a lot of
Elon,
people,
you mean Elon's not going to send back twice as many Bitcoin as I send him?
yeah, for a lot of people who are completely new to this, it's like this is the way that it works, right?
And it's yeah, exactly. It's easy for us to take for granted being familiar with this stuff, but like when you step back, like still the interfaces for all this stuff is like um still has a lot of room to go,
Yeah.
like
For me personally, about crypto, like I mentioned earlier, what I really appreciate about it is it's like the design of it, like the whole decentralized concept of it is something that really resonates with me. And not just from like a token or a value or a money perspective, but in general, right?
yeah,
I I was kind of you know not enjoying the fact that we started off in a very decentralized fashion on the internet with torrents and everything, and then we
mhm,
started moving towards a more centralized everything on the cloud that somebody else owns
yeah,
phase. So I think there are a lot of risks and a lack of independence and a lack of freedom that would come from it that a lot of people still don't realize. Many people do realize it now, that anything that's on somebody else's cloud is not really yours. You don't own it.
yeah.
You don't
Yeah,
have
I
any
agree.
control.
I followed and bought some of the early infrastructure coins because I believed in the need for decentralized services to get around that chokehold. Like I bought like Namecoin early on, and I bought like SIA and Storage and a couple of those other projects. I mean, most of them did tremendously bad, right? It was kind of like, but in financially, but in terms of like the idea, I think we have Arweave too, but I think maybe another generation of those that I think they are going to be
Yeah,
um,
I
much
think
more.
the yeah I
Yeah,
think the big problem that crypto still has is the fact that it's the user interface of it, right? It's not convenient enough for a layman to use, right? If
yeah,
somebody for somebody
exactly.
that's normal, like even though the wallets and stuff that we have today has come a long way, it's still not easy enough to use, right?
Even for myself, there's like when you're using Ethereum, a lot of transactions, like what is displayed on your hardware wallet or whatever, or even in MetaMask when you're signing a transaction, sometimes it like it's indecipherable, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, I guess I don't know. This is from yeah, I don't know. It's so to fault some newbies, again, like having human readable output on like a standard, like standardizing like just the basics of the user interface to where you can like be able to easily decipher what's going on. I mean, it's so simple, right? So
Yeah. I think the big crypto giants, your Coinbases and whatnot, uh, this is something that they should probably be spending a lot of money on. because the return on investment is probably going to be huge for them.
Oh
Like,
yeah, I mean, think of something the equivalent of, I hadn't really thought of it until just now, but I mean, think of how the W3C like web standards, how important those were for the uh, proliferation and adoption of HTTP, right? World Wide Web. So, if we could have if there were some common sense standards that people were able to create and adopt, that would probably be a positive thing for the space.
yep, yep. And I think open source is probably the way to get there as well, so that
Of course,
everybody,
yeah. Oh
everybody
yeah,
will
yeah. If it were
on top of it.
proprietary, then we're just going to discount it out of hand, right?
Yeah,
At least
yeah,
I would.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, like you, I like after I got into crypto, the decentralization is something I realized um uh, was really like at the crux of it, right? Like even if I still feel that even if like crypto quote unquote fails in terms of like financial adoption or what have you, or get superseded, like all these existing ones get superseded by newer generations that are able to solve some problems that current ones are struggling with. I do think that these current ones have like been extremely important in basically demonstrating that like these global networks, truly decentralized global networks with tremendous value, like is possible. And again, Bitcoin's been battle tested for getting close to what, 14 years now, something like that.
Yep.
Ethereum, you
Yeah,
can say
I
what
like to think of, these crypto winters as like, um, like people, like farmers sometimes burn their fields so that,
yeah,
they start fresh, or
yeah,
like the extinction level events that happens that, wipes out the dinosaurs, but, the mammals still survived, right? So it helps sometimes to have those events so that only the things that actually will survive, make it through. Um,
yeah.
but
I mean,
I think,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing to get to like clear out all the scammers and like let them move on to the next easiest grift, right?
yeah, because
But
at one point, it was almost like, it was almost a bad word, that NFT almost became a bad word, right?
yeah,
You use the word NFT, people thought you were like a scammer.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's I think it still is the case for a lot of
Yeah,
people.
yeah, for a lot of people it still is, but a lot of people have kind of forgotten about this whole
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. I don't know. I'm still passionate about it. I still think that um, the movement for decentralization and but also the fact that this is the really the um like the birth of truly decentralized provable ownership of digital goods, or however you want to put that, is remarkable in human history, right? So I think these early artifacts are to me like extremely profound. They're the they're truly the artifacts of this decent like this revolution for decentralization that I see is happening across all aspects of society across the globe. That there's these undercurrents that um, you know humanity's like pushing
Yeah,
up against
yeah.
these centralized
And,
systems.
and I think, and this is just, my personal perspective, but I have a feeling that, uh, even though today's large AI models are the antithesis of this. Like they're all very centralized. They require huge amounts of, cloud resources to run. I feel that in the future we will be moving towards a place where the AI models themselves run in a much more decentralized manner.
Oh yeah, I mean, think of how easy it would be to adapt something like we already have decentralized like tokens like render, where you can have essentially access to GPU render time
Yeah,
um, on the cloud. Well, it's just another extra couple steps to where we have um, essentially like a token or something to where you do have access to a model that is decentralized, where you can access the like you can see exactly how that's being run instead of Yeah, that's one thing I think is a little bit disturbing with like um, some of those large models is they're trying to. I know OpenAI is trying to essentially like pull up the ladder behind them and
Yeah. But I think the open source community has done a lot of good work. For example, I'm running a fine-tuned version of the Mistral open source model, if you've heard about it. So Mistral is this company based in France,
yeah.
and they got a lot of funding, mainly
I saw
because I
some
think,
people tweeting about that the last couple weeks. So yeah, they had a big release recently, right?
yeah, so their models are pretty small, so small that I can actually run it on CPUs. I don't even need a GPU. And it works pretty well locally, and I have full control over it, right? So I can fine tune it with whatever data that I have access to, and it's my local model, right? I don't need to, it's not even about the money anymore, right? It's
Yeah.
about if you don't have any sort of control over the model or the data that it has been trained on, then how much can you actually trust it for what you want to do with it, right?
Yeah, I mean that's another aspect where well like the training data is really important because I know with or from what I understand, like OpenAI, they've basically scraped the web for petabytes of data to train their models on. I mean, that's another case where um like you were saying, kind of like a decentralized, like mega powerful AI that
Yeah,
we could get access to. Well, we wouldn't have to like pull down all those petabytes of information, run it locally. We could choose which data sets of these versions or models of that AI is actually trained with that we're working with. I mean,
yeah, and it has to happen in a more organic manner. The
yeah,
main problem that I see with it, the way that it's happening right now, is
uh-huh,
OpenAI is what, like a few hundred people in the Bay Area, most of whom are kind of from the same sort of background, or from the same school of thought, right? So they are curating data sets from the internet, uh, which are, whether they like it or not, it's biased, right? All of
yeah,
the data sets is biased. And what are the other companies that are doing this? Anthropic, like, where are they based, right? They're in the same place. And most of it is the same people who are moving from one company to another, right? So you have like this small subset of a few hundred people working for different companies, creating these very powerful models with uh, data that they have themselves curated, which nobody else knows what data sets they're using.
yeah.
And
Like you said,
it
the
just,
the bias is real too. Like, one of the things that's been interesting to watch with Chat GPT and OpenAI is that, it's been apparent that they've been tweaking their models with like purposely for bias. So, I know one of the examples that was going around on Twitter is that you can ask Chat GPT to, write a great song about how great Joe Biden is, and it'll spit out something. And if you do something similar for Donald Trump, it'll refuse to for,
yeah, yeah.
under their quote unquote policy or whatever. So
So
um,
this is mainly happening because of this process called RHLF,
uh-huh.
RLHF, which is reinforcement learning via human feedback that they do. So they train the model, and the base model is kind of raw, right? Like it
Yeah.
talks about all kinds of stuff. And then on top of that, what they do is they kind of feed it a bunch of questions and answers, which are either manually written or like manually reviewed, so that they can feed it stuff like, hey, how do I make a bomb? And then the answer is, sorry, according to my content policy, I cannot tell you how, blah blah blah, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
that
Okay.
it kind of learns this, right? So every time it does something kind of really out there, it probably means that somebody's fed it data which kind of is biasing it more in a
Yeah.
particular, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Interesting.
even not looking at bias, I've seen the way that these models work. It varies a lot, and we kind of need to kind of reverse engineer it in a way to try to understand what's going on. So um, during my experiments, I've seen that models that have been trained with more amounts of multilingual data are better, not just at those languages, but also at stuff like reasoning, right? Like if your model only learned English, and you have another model which learned English and Chinese, and Hindi or
Oh,
Sanskrit,
interesting.
then
Mhm.
that model is better at doing other stuff than just language.
I see. Yeah.
And it's the same for, if your model has learned computer code, then it's better at non-coding tasks.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's about, I
Mhm.
think it's about the diversity of information that the models are receiving, right? Which again, causes me to think that it's important that this is not done in a very closed off small company just doing stuff.
Yeah. It's funny. In a similar fashion, like I was talking to someone recently. Like apparently, there's still countries where people have to use VPNs to bypass, essentially their countries
Yeah,
are putting like firewalls and attempting to block services. I think it is going to be important that we have a decentralized, some powerful decentralized platforms or models for AI that can circumvent, like I know the EU and the US are already trying to do their own legislation and again avoid these again, these are black boxes. We don't know what they're doing to like you said, to tweak and train and bias these models. So I think it's really important that we have, like you said, alternatives, and that we're not stuck with, like two companies out of the Bay Area that are the super majority.
yeah,
Yeah, in terms of so I know we kind of been bouncing around back and forth. So so Portion was a platform that was specifically for allowing for additions, hence the name, right?
yeah,
Portion.io. So so those pieces have recently been, you know,
yeah,
uh,
yeah. So
discovered and
yeah, I guess getting back to the story on those pieces. So
yeah.
what went off on a long tangent there. So what happened was, the portion went down. I couldn't reach them. Their website and stuff was down. And then basically I had thought that those pieces had been lost forever, because I couldn't track them down at all. I just knew that I had the physical copies of the original images with me, but then I had no provenance. I had no proof of mint or anything like that I could track down, right? So that was a story pretty much for like all the way until this year. And a few months ago, the Norwegian who is a part of the early AI art community, he had reached out to me for a different matter. It was about a different piece of mine, I think, on SuperRare, and he wanted to kind of ask me questions about it and stuff. And then as part of the conversation we were having, he kind of mentioned casually about, are there any other older pieces of mine that are available on SuperRare uh, that are available for purchase? So when I looked at it, most of my early pieces are already owned by other collectors. But then I
Mhm.
remembered that I had art on Portion, so I told him about it. I told him that this stuff existed, but the website's gone down, and I don't know what happened to it. So he was interested, and then he said he's going to go and do some digging, and he did some good digging, and I think he reached out to one of the founders of Portion, and he was able to track down the fact that this like most of the pieces that I had minted, like some of it had got collected, and we don't know who owns them anymore. But most of the original pieces still sat in an old wallet that he shared the wallet with me. And then turns out that it was one of my own old wallets, which I'd completely forgotten about. I'd created it, I think, in 2017 or something, and I just started off. And luckily I was able to kind of recover the passkey and get into it. And then I see that the pieces are there, right? They're all sitting there. And this is really old art, and there was no, it doesn't have a wrapper. So to actually see the art, you need to actually look into the IPFS hash itself, and then you can see the art is there. It's part of the IPFS. It's part of the contract, and it's there in all its glory, right? So I was super stoked to see that this stuff still existed. and props to the Norwegian for actually taking the time and finding the stuff out. So that's how we rediscovered it. We discovered that the stuff exists, and we've shared it on the early AI art community, and a lot of cool people have collected some of this art. We have a developer who is working with us to build a wrapper for this. So I think once the wrapper is built, then you'll start seeing the tokens show up on OpenSea or wherever you want them to
So
show
that's
up.
how Portion was doing it, is they like their custom contract was basically creating ERC20s in essence
Yes.
to represent shares of or portions of the artwork.
Yeah, exactly. So these specific artworks, there are 4 of them in total, and each of them having like different multiple editions. So these 4 pieces are the ones that I was referring to earlier. They use the neural mural technique, and are kind of large image sizes that have been kind of patched up together by the algorithm.
Yeah, interesting. That I mean, it's amazing that I mean, thanks to crypto, like most stuff never dies unless it's in a dead wallet. So that's got to be really a really nice feeling though, seeing like all your work get collected and seeing interest in it.
Yeah, I mean,
mean,
it was totally out of the blue. I completely did not expect this, and in a way, this has happened. Not this specifically, but the way that crypto art has worked for me has been in waves, and not necessarily always coinciding with like a crypto bull run or anything. Right? Like every now and then, sometimes I see that there are collectors who discover my art, and in maybe like spurts of a few months, collect a bunch of it, and then it's silence for a long time, and then somebody else discovers it, and then the cycle happens again. I appreciate it each time it happens, this time especially because I thought that these pieces are lost forever, right? And now I kind of find that there's this whole community of people who are interested in early AI art that I didn't know about, and yeah, it's just really cool.
yeah, I mean, it's gotta feel good to get some recognition also for being one of the people at the forefront of well, I mean, again, the in 2018 the NFT scene was already very small, but again, being one of the first people that were making AI
Yeah, it is.
NFTs.
It is very, very gratifying because I think when I was doing that stuff in 2018 or 2017 or whenever it was, it was super niche, right? Like people are like, what the hell is this guy doing?
I mean, a lot of artists were even hiding the fact they were using AI early on too, because there's a kind of a stigma with it too, right?
Yeah. And like you mentioned earlier, a lot of the early art, like it was raw, it was kind of low res, so it was hard to kind of get people to be serious about it, right? So that was part of the reason why I kind of built my own algorithm to kind of make it look like something that I would like to hang up on a wall, right?
Yeah, it's a tough sell, like with like a 256 by 256 image for for people to take seriously. It's just again like it's just too low resolution for people to really appreciate. So yeah, having that neural model to like actually create like and
Yeah.
it's stuff that's stood up because you did that. It still stands up today and it still looks great. Whereas a lot of other stuff is unless you're going for that aesthetic is is kind of rough, right?
Yeah, yeah. And me personally, like I suck at marketing. uh I'm more of a like a heads down, do stuff and then move on, do like new stuff kind of person.
Yeah.
I'm not really good at kind of marketing the stuff that I do. So for me, like having a platform out there like SuperRare to get started was great. And just every time I meet somebody who's interested in art, whether they're an artist or a collector, it's just very it just warms my heart because I just know that there are more people who like the weird stuff that I do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely good times. Yeah, and that's one, like you were saying, that's one thing I agree is like it's nice right now where most of the people that you're in these vintage NFT communities are like most of the people that are trying to make a quick buck are gone by now because all the hype's gone. So, you have I don't know, it's an interesting scene with people that are definitely have a a different take and have the vision and I think of where things are going and the appreciation for these developments that are now we're again these are some of the earliest digital digital trade like securely tradable trackable NFTs for of AI art output, right? I mean, I think that's really rad considering how radically AI is, like we've been talking about this entire episode, just been really like changing everything and it doesn't seem to be slowing down either, you know.
Yeah, it's almost like art movements that used to take decades to play out are now happening over the course of a couple of years or like even months, right?
Yeah, I know, right? Um, it's funny. I got a 4090 like a few months ago, and I've been too caught up with IRL stuff, life stuff, but
Yeah.
I've been meaning to play around with some of these AI models that can take advantage of that. And it's so funny. Like I haven't had time to focus on it, but in my Twitter timeline, I see um, all these like new models and developments like all the time. Like it would take like full time just to keep up with all the stuff that's coming out. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, for
bonkers.
sure. Yeah, I think the good news is that it's okay that you missed all of the old stuff because all of it is out of date already, right? You don't need to catch up on anything. Just listen to the latest thing that's out today.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, but again, I mean, props for getting some recognition for again doing some really cool work back in the day when, again, like this was in crypto winter when no one else really cared, right? So, which is I think
Thank you.
even
Yeah, thank you so much.
a testament. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of, you have like this portfolio of early work and also your your non your real work in ML and AI, as well, like we discussed. Like where do you see like what's your focus and where do you see um, this stuff going? And do you have any other projects that you want to talk about going forward?
Yeah, so I think at least from an art um, plus AI plus Web3 crypto perspective, I think what will matter going forward is whatever the tool is, right? Like even if it's Midjourney or the next thing or whatever you use, the ability to kind of create something uh, that resonates with your sensibilities but is unique in a way, right? Because everybody can create photorealistic images using these latest tools. They all look great, but then they all look like what everybody else is doing, right? So if you want to create a style that takes thought, it takes effort, just like photography, right? Everybody can take photos. So whatever the technology may be, I think there will always be scope for people to create great art. For me personally, I'm kind of struggling to kind of devote more time to art, but I do have a bunch of different kind of projects going on. I had some old projects which kind of got abandoned. So
Mhm.
there was a project in OpenSea which I had started, which I kind of had to abandon at some point. I haven't gone back to it yet. The idea was that there would be art, AI art pieces, each of which was associated to a story as well,
Uh-huh.
and those stories would only be available to the collector, right?
Oh, that's
So
cool.
Yeah, so it was like an early attempt at making something more interactive, so that there was something at stake there beyond just the art itself, right? So I want to kind of maybe play around with more of that, where the art is interactive in a way, right? Where like there is some component of it which is unique and only accessible to the collector. This is where I think art blocks and FX hash also interests me, and also the fact that the entire code that is creating the art would also reside on chain with something like art blocks. So I have an art blocks or a project that I intend for art blocks that I've been working on. Hopefully, I can wrap it up by the start of the new year. So yeah, I'll share details about it if I'm able to publish it by that time.
That would be
Um,
cool.
yeah, and there's also some work which I'm trying to do, which is kind of have a link between the art and something in the real world, right? So it's I know it's kind of vague at the moment, but I'm trying to do stuff that is fun, right? It's fun for me,
Yeah.
and hopefully fun for the people that collect it and see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think generative AI I mean, or generative art is also really fun too. It went through its uh, like crazy boom with the art block stuff, but I think it's now kind of more back to more sane levels. And I have a friend who's been doing some stuff with FX hash too, and
Yeah.
there's a ton of tremendous art and artists that are doing amazing things. So yeah, that I wouldn't mind doing something like that in the future too, but it's always about time and focus. But that would be cool. Yeah, if you yeah, definitely keep me in the loop if you get a project accepted.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, um
Maybe I'll send you some of the recent work that I've been working on that hasn't been minted yet. I plan to do it. It's just about getting the time to take the time to get
oh,
them
sure,
onto.
yeah. Yeah, I'd love to see it. Yeah, I mean, so we kind of touched on a lot of stuff, a lot of different topics in terms of your art and AI and crypto. I mean, is there anything else you want to touch on or anything you want to expand on? I mean, I know you have a ton of knowledge on the subject.
I think we covered most of what would be of interest to the listeners. And in general, I just wanted to say that my art specifically, it's kind of influenced by the stuff that I read mostly, and the places I visit. And I am a student of history, so I like to read up and listen to a lot of history about stuff that happened, and so and then travel to places. Uh, Kind of that's what I use as my source for creativity when it comes to art, or I dabble a little bit in like poetry and creative writing sometimes. So this is where it comes from. And I know that art is a hard thing to talk about without sounding pretentious.
Yeah.
So forgive me if I do sound so at any I sounded so at any time during this conversation, but it's hard, and this is also one of the reasons why I've had difficulties like fitting into traditional art circles. Like I've
Yeah.
I've been part of artist associations and gone to like exhibitions and meetups and been with other artists, but I just find the whole environment to be very very pretentious that I don't fit in. I'm like, what
Yeah.
the hell is going on here, right?
Yeah, it's really fascinating to like you said, it there's all these debates in the scene about like what is art and all this other stuff. But I like one thing I guess the final things I can say about like looking at your AI art versus a lot of the other stuff again is just personally myself, I think it actually looks good. Um, you know, versus some of the other stuff that I mean it's interesting. Some of the other stuff is cool just as an experiment or whatnot, but I mean I think it's also kind of really interesting that for such early work that I think it still looks good. I like the aesthetic on your those pieces you created too. So I think that's really rad.
Thank you. I think, you know, my final statement to anybody who's listening, especially, you know, any artists who are listening, would be don't fear change, and try to understand, try to get the details firsthand, right? Because many cases what I've seen is that there is a lot of misunderstanding about, especially about AI and what AI art is. Many people just think that AI is just like it, you know, you feed it a lot of images that people have drawn, and then it's just picking one of those images and making small changes to it and just outputting it. So it's like compressing all of this data and then decompressing it when people ask it for stuff. That isn't how this works. And if you try to go the route of saying that, you know, this is all copyrighted and I want you know, I don't want future models to see my stuff, I think it might have the opposite effect of what you intend to. It's the same as, you know, an artist from the 1900s saying that, you know, I don't want anybody else to see my art and be influenced by it, right? So all of the art that we have today are influenced by all of the artists that came before, right? And if you're saying that, you know, I don't want anybody to be influenced by my art, that's you know, that's just bad for you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, not to fight progress and work with it. So yeah, definitely. Well, it's been a lot of fun talking to you about this stuff. I mean, you've got and I mean, definitely an amazing background in this stuff with your education and real world experience too, which is you know, got to be super rare considering, you know, I mean, now I'm sure like everyone's going into, you've probably got a ton of computer science guys going into AI right now and machine learning, but you know, I would imagine there wasn't a ton of people that were working with this stuff when you were, so definitely rad.
Yeah, this conversation has been a lot of fun, especially because I don't get a lot of chances to talk about this stuff at this at this level.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.